Hey everyone, welcome back to Base, the podcast. Today we have the pleasure of talking with one of the greatest minds in our industry. He has a PhD in sports science. He's the author of several books, including Glute Lab. He's the inventor of the hip thruster and a coach who specializes in training women. He's famously known as the Glute Guy. Please welcome Bret Contreras. Hi, Bret.
Hey, Bret.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Now, for our audience, I'm sure a lot of them know who you are and have heard about you, especially because we specialize in training women as well. We are sure lots of the girls that we train have heard of the Glute Guy. Mm-hmm. But can you please share a little bit about who you are and how the Glute Guy was born?
Well, first, before I get started on that, I got to congratulate Sebastian here. That Thor's 1,100 plus pound deadlift is like heard around the world. So congrats on that. I know you're his coach. So
I wasn't expecting it to go there, but man, I'm really chuffed. Thank you so much.
It's been a big week for us over here for sure.
I like to think of myself as a big guy, like 250 pounds, and he's 450 pounds. Is that true?
450 pounds for this event. Yeah, it's hard to compare anything with this guy. He's just a human giant.
He pretty much takes up the whole screen.
I feel like a little.
No, you actually look quite big. I'm
You're
surprised.
So
yeah, you're big.
I'm tall. People always say on my Instagram, they're like, or like they see me and they're like, "Whoa, you're a lot taller than I thought." I'm like, "What do I look like? A little like short guy on my Instagram?"
How tall are you?
6'4". I don't know.
Oh, right, you are tall.
I remember when I came to visit you in San Diego, I literally came up to your belly button.
Yeah, so what is that? In centimeters, that's 193 centimeters.
We talk feet. We talk feet.
We talk inches and feet as well.
Yeah.
When it comes to height.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a tall guy. But yeah, definitely, when anyone's standing next to Hafthor, he makes you look like a midget. So we all stand united in that one.
So about me, I'm speaking in my gym in San Diego. I consider myself a lifter first because I'm 43 years old, but I'm still going for gains myself. I still experiment with my training. I try new things, and I'm always wanting to be a little bit more jacked, a little bit stronger. It gets harder and harder. He's been training longer and longer, but I'm still setting PRs, and then a coach second. I coach tons and tons of women and tons of both in real life and online. And then a scientist third. I pride myself on trying to be evidence-based and read research, but I don't always agree with all the researchers. Like they're more like by the book. Like I feel like to be evidence-based, it means consider everything. You don't just assume that's not evidence. It's not a published study on it. It's like a study finally came out showing squats built the glutes. Before that, there were like no studies. So can we be like, there's no evidence that squats build the glutes. There hasn't been a published paper on it. It's like, obviously they build glutes. Look at powerlifters and Olympic weightlifters. So I base a lot of my knowledge on, I feel like a third of your knowledge is what you learn on your own in the gym, training on your own. A third is what you learn training other people. And then a third is what you learn like reading and listening to podcasts and talking to other coaches. And you have to do all of them in order to maximize your understanding.
Yeah, I like that. I definitely think it's good to have an open mind and not just be ruled by science. You just said a third. Something that we've heard you speak about is your rule of thirds, and I think that's something that we want to get to later on. But before we ask you for your philosophies on your rule of thirds, how did you come about to be the glute guy?
So, growing up as a kid, I was so insecure. I had no butt. I remember being in high school and I had a crush on these three girls. They were like three of the more popular girls, and they're like, "Hey, let's go watch football practice." I love looking at the guys in the butts in their football outfits, and I'm like, "Great, I'm going to be a virgin for life." They care about glutes. I'm done. And then I was playing golf with my sister's boyfriend, and he's like, I still remember on the ninth hole, I'm bending over to swing, and he's like, "Bret, you have no butt. It's like your back just goes right into your leg. It's missing that like protuberance is supposed to stick out." And I'm like, "Man, why is he feel so comfortable?" Like, would you be like in the locker room and being like, hey, buddy, you have no penis at all. It's like just a little nub, you know. It's a
Brutal.
Yeah,
But the brutal honesty in it, just saying it just so matter of fact, not even worrying that it's going to be a little bit offensive. That's pretty offensive.
Oh, so good.
Well, I remember being like, at that time, you know, being 16 years old and like lanky, I had been doing lifting weights, but I did, you know, my routine was like, I had a little barbell set and I did military press, I did push-ups, I did curls, I did calf raises, I did crunches, but I didn't do anything for my back or legs. Like I didn't, I couldn't do chin-ups, I couldn't do dips, and I tried squatting and I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. I wish I knew that then what I know now about progressions and things like that. But I remember thinking, okay, like, I wish there were like, I'm getting lines under my pecs from doing push-ups. I wonder if I could start building my glutes, but I don't feel a lot of these like, I remember doing deadlifts and just, if I had a video, it would have been like a YouTube classic, like the round back. I would feel them all in my back and just do complete round back deadlifts. I mean, we're talking like 1992 here. We didn't have the internet back then, and we you just learn by doing and watching other people and trying to read muscle mags. So I started studying the glutes, and I remember being like, why don't bodybuilders have? They never mention glutes. It's like every other body part gets isolated. You train your traps, your delts, all three heads, your biceps, your triceps, your pecs, your lats, your erectors, your abs, your obliques, your quads, your hamstrings, your calves. The only missing thing there is the glutes, and it was like, no, you don't ever have to. Like, bodybuilders have a leg day. You had like your chest day, your back day, your shoulder day, your arm day, your leg day, but it was always legs or quads and hamstrings. No male bodybuilder ever talked about glutes. So I would read what they would do I'd be like, you know, I'd go to the like, I remember being 16, going to the store and checking out the muscle mags and being like, what does Ronnie Coleman do for his glutes or for his legs? Cause he has big glutes. And then I remember being 19, and so we're talking 23 years ago, my cousin bought me a book. It was something like The Complete Guide to Butt and Leg Development. I still have it, but I was like, this is awesome. Why'd you get it for me? He goes, cause I've never met someone so obsessed with the glutes. And that was 24 years ago. And I'm still just as passionate to this day.
Something interesting about the way your name pops up a lot in what I've been doing. I mean, I've been in the industry for 17 years, which by the sounds of it's nowhere near as long as you. But, you know, I've mainly my clientele is based on performance, and when people want to get good at a certain movement, we practice that movement extensively. In my world, it's usually based around powerlifting, squats, bench press, deadlift. And I'm also an educator. And the way that I educate my audience is by teaching them what I do best. I don't want to teach them stuff that I don't do. It just doesn't make sense. But I very frequently get the question of, okay, well, what about us who wants to have an aesthetics goal and you know, a body part in particular with the females that is extremely important and popular, as you completely know, which is why you've based your business around it, is glute development. And the reason why I promote the work that I do is because that's the work that I do. Like, I know that squats develop the glutes, and I see a lot of amazing squatters with great glute development, so that's the way that I teach it. And people see it as, oh, you must be against Bret Contreras because he's got a differing opinion. I think, I don't know if he's got a differing opinion. I'm going to find that out now. But I don't think that it's a different opinion. I just think he's got different audience and different goals with what he wants to achieve with his exercises. Just recently, I did a seminar. It was a female-only seminar. And a study just came out discussing the benefits of squats versus hip thrusters, saying that the squat was superior for increasing hypertrophy than the hip thruster, contrary to previous belief. And I thought, okay, well, that's pretty cool, because if someone came to me, and I know that I work very closely with Felicia and Dinny, they've got the female-only business, and we actually incorporate a variety of different exercises, not exclusive to squats and not exclusive to glute bridges either, but we include both. But it was definitely something that I wanted to know the answer, and someone put their hand up and said, this was literally the day that it came out, and they said, Bret Contreras actually disputed the study. And I thought, I didn't have a chance to hear what he had to say. But now that I've got you face to face, instead of reading about it, I'd love to hear your opinion. What are your thoughts? I'm sure you've read the study. What are your thoughts on the study?
Okay, so this is going to be crazy for you guys to hear, because, what's really sad about this is that, like, when you read a study, like you just assume it's legit. Like that's what we all do. We're like, this is like was really performed. And so here's an interesting thing. Never in my life have I ever suspected that a study was fake until this Mateus Barballo is the author of that study. Mm-hmm. A couple years prior, he published a volume paper, and it showed that doing 5 to 10 sets a week was superior than doing 15 to 20 sets a week for like different muscles in the body. And so bodybuilders are all doing it wrong. But I looked at this study, and I discussed the study with my staff, my trainers and everything. I showed them it, and I printed it out, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the data and I'm going, holy crap, like this isn't how, like I've published 50 or 51 studies now.
Wow.
Data doesn't ever look like this. It's never this neat. So I called up my friend James, and I'm like, James, this is fake. This study is fake. This was 2 years ago. I go, this study is fake. And he's like, oh, I'm like, look at it. Nothing's ever this neat. I called a couple of my friends, and they're like, well, I go, can we prove that? Is there a way to show that it's fake? And they're like, I don't know. And then of course, there's so much to talk about, but of course this study was published, and I look at the authors, and it's Barballo and this Paulo Gentile, who's his professor. Now, Paulo Gentile has bashed hip thrusts over and over. And when this was published, he comes out on Instagram and he's like, I am the greatest researcher of all time. Like, it's bizarre. So I start looking at the study, and I'm like, this is fake. There's no way that, okay, so it looked at, I wrote a response in my friend Alan Aragon's research review. I was going to publish it on my blog, but some stuff happened and I was told, hold off on it. Okay. So I never posted on my blog. I intend to, I want to, but I pointed out everything from my experience as a trainer. I'm not this statistical whiz. It's funny. I taught math, high school math for 6 years. I'm really good at algebra and geometry and trigonometry, but I'm not good at stats. I hate stats. I have colleagues that are really good at stats. I'm not that good at stats. So I can't pick this thing apart from a statistical perspective, but just from knowing about training people, I mean, I found so much stuff. And then I started going through other studies that they had. And Sebastian, you'll appreciate this because they took Brazilian female lifters, and these lifters had first of all, they were stronger. They gained 75 pounds on their squat in, was it 12 weeks, just squatting 1 day a week. And they were already squatting 205 pounds. And then they went to 280 pounds in 12 weeks of squatting 1 day a week. And I'm like, I've never had a client gain someone who could already squat 205, go to 280. I've never had someone gain that much strength so quickly if they were already proficient. But if their squat was already stronger than their hip thrust, and I'm going, if you were similar in strength with your squats and hip thrusts, everyone is way stronger at their hip thrust than their squat. Now, maybe some people you work with, Sebastian, aren't like that, but you work with the biggest freaks. I train the normal people, could Thor hip thrust 1,000 pounds. Maybe if he worked his way up to it, I don't think he cares enough. But my
it's
point
something that I haven't tested yet on any of my high-level athletes, so I can't even give you an answer.
I know that Big Z loves his hip thrust.
Yep,
but he loves
that.
Those guys have giant legs. Most women, they're way stronger with hip thrusts. You might say a typical woman, is a strong lifter who has proficient experience in all three lifts. They might be able to squat 200 pounds, deadlift, 250, 275, and hip thrust 450 or 500. That's just the way it is. So I already was looking at all this stuff, and I'm like, man, this is bizarre. Then I look at another study, and it was from the same weird protocol, these men had a 10 rep max bench press of, gosh, this was so long ago. Anyway, in 12 weeks of benching 1 day a week with just 2 sets, they gained a third of their body mass on the bench press so it was okay, so if I was to do that, the most I've ever bench pressed is 355 pounds, right? So my 10 rep max, the most my 10 rep max is 275. So it would be like me just benching 2 sets a week for 12 weeks. And then all of a sudden I can bench a third of my body weight, which is 80 pounds, 80 some pounds, which would be like me benching 355 pounds for 10 reps. Think about benching your 1 rep max for 10 now. That will never happen in 12 weeks.
Never happen ever
So
in my case.
It would never happen ever. You know that. So I would never risk my professional reputation and say this study's fake if I know from a statistical standpoint, it just doesn't add up. I believe that this study is fake in addition to other studies are fake. What I want to know is why. Why would they do this? But if I was wrong about that every researcher would lose respect for me. I'd be the talk of the town. But I have reason to believe that it's a fake study. So I believe if we did the actual study, I think hip thrust would win. I think it's funny. I want to show you this protocol too, Sebastian. It's like this weird, I'm going to pull this up. It's this weird protocol. And it's funny because I had my niece do the protocol. So you do.
Are you going to try and test it based on this? Beyond just
I'm not going to reproduce the study, but okay. No. Oh, it's 24 weeks. Okay, so week 1, 5, 9, they did, week 1, 5, 9, 13, 17, 21, they did 12 to 15 reps with 30 to 60 seconds rest. That doesn't build strength. Like, 12 to 15 reps with 30 to 60 seconds reps. So I had my niece do that. She can squat 200 pounds. And I had her, and it's full squats. And it's a 2 second down, 2 second up tempo. So you can't lift as much when you're actually controlling the tempo, Mm-hmm. And so I had her do the actual protocol with that much rest. And I have to change the plates, and I've got to be, so another reason, it's fake is that they said there's like one trainer for every 5 lifters, but you have to have one-on-one here because I got to be right there to change the plates because they fail. It has to be 2 failure. Mm-hmm. They talk about where failure doesn't mean like, oh, I can't do another rep. It means you actually fail. So they have to go down and then come up and they can't get it and they go to the racks. And you have to curl the thing and put it back in the rack and then adjust the plates. So if they're doing, so she started out with like, my niece started out with, set 1 was 115 pounds and she got it for 14 reps. Then 30 to 60 seconds rep, did 95 pounds for 11 reps on her second set. Then her third set, she did 65 pounds for 12 reps. Her fourth set, she just did the bar for 15 reps. The fifth set was the bar for 10 reps. And the sixth set, the bar for 8 reps. And she couldn't sleep on her stomach for 5 days. Her quads were so incredibly sore. Uh-huh. So it's just this weird, like Sebastian, you'd never use this protocol to build strength. It's never. Like 12 to 15 reps with 30 to 60 seconds rest. And the next week you do 4 to 6 reps with 3 to 4 minutes rest. Then the next week you do 10 to 12 reps with 1 to 2 minutes. And then the next week you do 6 to 8 reps with 2 to 3 minutes. Like who even does this protocol? So that doing that protocol 1 day a week would not build that much strength. You'd need to squat them twice a week. But anyway, the study is not to be taken seriously, and we do need a study looking at hypertrophy. All we have right now is EMG, and I believe this paper will be retracted in time. We only have an EMG study right now showing more EMG. Here's the thing people say, though, because all the people who wrote up the study, who wrote up reviews about the study, they were like, well, the squat clearly has more range of motion, and it puts more tension on the muscles. I don't believe it puts more tension on the muscles because I study the glutes, and the glutes activate more at end range compared to in the stretch. Not every muscle is like that. Only like the glutes and erectors are like that. Other muscles, like you get the greatest tension more in mid-range. With glutes or mid-range or like a lengthened position, but with glutes, it's like the shortest possible. Now, through modeling, biomechanists I've worked with have said you get the greatest tension in the glutes just with a very slight stretch. So when they're stretched deep, real down deep, you don't get the greatest amount of active tension. So I think a hip thrust would be producing more tension. And as for range of motion, yes, the barbell squat you get more barbell displacement compared to hip thrust. But here's the deal. As far as active active tension on the glutes. So with the squat, say you start at a very acute angle, you're deep down in hip flexion, it's like with the squat. Are we recording video here too?
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, so with the squat, maybe you go down to here, and this is where you go to parallel, and there's tension on the glutes. You come up, and about right here, you're kind of no tension. So it's from here to here. But here's the deal. With a hip thrust, maybe you start here, you come up, but then you keep going, and then you post your pelvic tilt, or you just keep going into hip hyperextension. Well, here's the thing. People have different levels of hip hyperextension mobility. In the literature, some people have 45 degrees. The average is like 20. If you have 45 degrees of hip hyperextension mobility, meaning you can go way past neutral, you don't use any of that in a squat. You're using a lot of that range in a hip thrust. So it just depends. We need to look at these things, but here's what any reasonable person would conclude. Well, I think about I like comparing squats versus hip thrusts. I did that in my PhD. It's just intriguing, but every program I've ever written has both of them for glute development. Why wouldn't you want one exercise that works you in the lengthened position, one exercise that works the shortened position? I believe they're complementary. And hell, some people shouldn't squat that much. They just have the worst, anthropometries for it.
Sure.
Maybe they should do high box squats or something instead of, squatting 3 days a week. And some people shouldn't deadlift as often if they have pure physique goals. I can usually find a good variation for them. But some people don't like barbell hip thrust. My point is we should learn all the exercises and then figure out what variations suit the person best for their goals and their anatomy.
I totally agree, and I appreciate your response to that. For my sport, I'm training people for performance and people that want to get good at a squat. A large percentage of my work is actually skill acquisition and technique work on the specific movement. But working with the females, working with Felicia and Dinny, they're business-based body babes, it's definitely something that we've incorporated, actually both. The way that I consider it is like this: a deltoid raise, a lateral raise for a deltoid is an excellent builder, but does it mean that you exclude a shoulder press? No, it doesn't. Why not have both? They absolutely complement each other, and we could use the same examples for all of the muscles. So I think that the problem is that misinterpretation of all of our audience will look at someone like you and say, you're a hip thruster, so you hate squats. And they look at someone like me and they say, you're a squatter, so you hate the hip thrust. So I'd like to clear that. It's not how it goes. It's not how it goes. But I appreciate your perspective on that. Thank you, Bret.
If you were going to try to build someone's glutes maximally with squats, I don't know. How would you program for them? Would you say, I'm going to have them squat 2 days a week? Would you have them squat 3 days a week? It's like, would you have them do just a DUP approach? Probably.
The interesting thing is, and it sounds like a cop-out, but the answer is always it depends. And it's different levels of strength might need. So let's just talk about the strongest person on the planet right now, Hafthor. I can't have him doing multiple times per week because he's too strong and he needs a little bit more recovery. But I've had great results with some of my athletes, like Dinny here. Her first squat program was a squat every day program that we based off a fella named John Brose. He was the coach of Pat Mendez, which was an amazing American weightlifter. He was the strongest teenager in America, and he wrote out this squat everyday program, and we tried it on people that weren't lifting as much, and it worked really, really well. We got Dinny from something like an 80 kilogram squat to 140. So what's that? A blue plate and a green, which is 80 kilos. I don't know how many pounds that is. To 308 pounds as a 52 kilo girl. Like, it was a really great result. But if I got someone really big and strong that's squatting over 700 pounds to do that every day, I'm quite sure not only would we not see the same result, but we'd even see a whole bunch of injuries. And this is where it's a case by case basis. And you mentioned before the study that he conducted 2 years before that, saying that 5 sets is superior to 10 sets. It's like, well, I've got my strongest athletes that periodize their reps and sets and tempos and intensities over however long the block is in preparation for a competition. And they may start with about 15 to 20 sets per body part. And then as the weights get heavier, like Thor towards the end, he was doing 3 total sets. one of them was heavy and 2 of them were really light per week for a deadlift. And that's because he's lifting weights that no other human has ever done. So it's a funny one. Like, that's the thing that I don't like about the science. When I hear people say, oh, 5 sets is better than 10, it's like, well, when? And I want some context behind that.
Good. I so agree with you. And that's why I get, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a coach before I'm a the scientist talking absolutes. And every time I hear something, I'm like, well, that would work for this client, but not for this client. If I tried that with this client, it would put him backwards. It's funny you mentioned John Brose. I went and visited him in 2009, and I wrote an article, Max Out on Squats Every Day. I wrote that article for T Nation back in the day. But you're absolutely right. And so with hip thrust, interestingly, so hip thrust, what I found in my PhD research was when people do squats, okay, you have more barbell displacement, but on the way down, you use only 10% less force than you do on the way up. Meaning you've got to control that weight on the way down. You can't dive bomb the squat. Now you can tell people like lower the hip thrust slowly under control, but they just kind of let it go. It's kind of like with a deadlift when you kind of let it go. You let gravity do it for you. So with the hip thrust, they were only using 1/3 of the force on the way down than on the way up, which means that the hip thrust was a shorter overall range of motion, mostly concentric movement. The squat is a longer range of motion, eccentric and concentric movement. The squat stretches the glutes to a greater degree. It's going to cause more muscle damage. The hip thrust is not going to cause as much muscle damage. So, and systemically, it's not as hard either as a squat. Just sometimes you can, especially the deadlift is like that. You feel like you got hit by a train the next day.
For sure.
Whereas the hip thrust, a lot of these girls could hip thrust, 4 or 5 days a week. So it's hard to kind of think of a study protocol that it's like, if you do it 2 days a week, you're like, as a practitioner, I'm like, well, why would you only hip thrust 2 days a week? You could hip thrust these girls 4 days a week. So it's hard to compare the two. But in every reasonable person, in my opinion, when you would use both in their program, if glute growth was the goal.
Something we spoke about last year was if you want maximal glute development, should you do heavy, moderate, or light loads? Can we talk about this?
So interesting. I've got like 4 studies up on my tabs right now that I'm planning on reading, but I'm really interested on like in the individual nature of muscle damage and recovery. And there's a lot of studies on this. And it's, what got me thinking about this was when Hattie Boydell came and visited me. I'm like, this was it when I lived in Phoenix. We trained glutes 4 straight days in a row, and she did enough volume to kill a horse. And, I'm like, how is this? She can handle so much, and if I did that with some of my other clients, they would be sick.
Yeah, we spoke about that, the recovery gene. We said I had the recovery gene, right?
Yeah, there's a recovery gene. There's a lot of genes that are there, and there's even, they've done like studies on the genetics of rhabdomyolysis and things like this. Some people are just way more predispositioned for muscle damage than others. And so, like, I feel like I can't do as much volume as other people because I get beat up. I'm sore the next day. Other people are like, they never get sore. And there's another study that just recently got published. It was interesting. They had one group do like more, like less sets, but so what's cool is each subject was their own control, because say I was one of the subjects. My left leg, I'm going to do 3 sets of leg extensions to failure. Mm-hmm. But on my right leg, I'm going to do 6 sets of leg extensions, but a few reps shy of failure. Some people saw better results going more high effort but less volume. Other people saw better results, and they'd have one leg that clearly saw more results than the other leg, which leads me to think that our programs need to be individualized. But how the hell would we know? You're just guessing. But I think some people are kind of more volume people. They don't kind of go take every set to failure, but they thrive by more volume. Other people, might thrive more through pushing the sets to failure, but doing a little bit less. We need to learn more about that over time. But in general, I like training the glutes 3 days a week in general. Mm-hmm. Could you do it 2 days a week? Absolutely. Could you do it 5 days a week? Yes. Let's think about muscle damage. They get the biggest stretch and the most eccentric activity with things like squats and lunges, So can you do heavy ass, like 5 sets of 10 squats, followed by 3 sets of 10, or like 3 sets of 20 walking barbell lunges every day? Hell no. Can you do hip thrust? Can you do abduction, like band work and like cable out? Like think about an abduction movement. You're standing. When you do abduction, you never even go into a stretch. Like you're here and you go like this. This doesn't even go into a stretch right here. You're just in neutral and you move to a shortened position. So I believe that that goes into my rule of thirds, which we can talk about later. But could you do 5 days a week? Yeah. I've had clients like Natalia Mello back in the day. She won the second Miss Bikini Olympia. She's like Bret in Brazil. She's Brazilian. She's like, in Brazil, Bret, we work glutes every day. We have like sections of the gym that are just for glute training, you know? And so, but they do a lot of ankle weight stuff, a lot of variety. But you watch her train and she's not going to failure. She's really doing higher reps, really squeezing, a lot of mind-muscle connection. So I think if I had to just create a program for the masses, I would do 3 days a week. I would do, around 12 sets a day. This kind of goes, should I go through my rule of thirds? Because this goes right into it.
Definitely. This is your philosophy for glute development, glute training.
The reason I thought of this is because if you talk to the researchers and all the literature, but I want to add, this literature hasn't been conducted on glutes. We're taking the literature with like quads and pecs and other muscle groups and then applying it to the glutes. But there's been none really looking at glutes except the Barbalo studies, which I don't trust at all. But in general, the consensus is doing around 10 to 20 sets a week is optimal for muscle development, or like 12 to 24 sets. That's optimal. So if you wanted to grow your biceps, you do 12 to 24 sets a week. You don't do more than that. And look at every female with the best glute development. I've trained half of them. The Bikini Olympians, the top 10, they do more than 12 to 24 sets a week of glutes. Mm-hmm. They all do. So it was a way of kind of trying to say, well, why? Why are they able to do way more sets for glutes? And first of all, the glutes are a unique muscle. They're the biggest muscle, but they do a lot of actions. They do hip extension, hip abduction, hip external rotation, posterior pelvic tilt, which is kind of hip hyperextension. It's kind of the same thing. And there's exercises that work you a lot in the stretch position, ones that work you in the shortened position. So with hip extension exercise, there's vertical hip extension exercise, squats, lunges, deadlifts, good mornings. There's horizontal ones. These are your hip thrusts, your back extensions, your cable pull throughs, your reverse hypers, your 45-degree hypers, your kickbacks. They work you more in the extended, like end range position. Then you've got your abduction movements, which you can do flexed or frontal plane or transverse plane, flexed or straight up. And so transverse or frontal plane hip abduction, those don't beat you up that much. So if you were to do 12 sets a day, 3 times a week, so you do 36 total sets a week, or even if you did 16 sets 4 times a week, you'd be doing 36 to 48 sets. You could get away with it if you follow the rule of thirds, meaning, so there's 3 parts to the rule of thirds. Think of 3 little circles with each with like broken into thirds. Mm-hmm. So the first is vector, training vector. Like a third of your exercise should be vertical. These are your squats, lunges, etc. Another third should be horizontal in nature. These are your hip thrusts, glute bridges, back extensions, kickbacks. Then the remaining third should be lateral or rotary. These are your abduction movements. And those work the upper glutes better, the glute medius and maybe the upper subdivision of the glute max. Mm-hmm. And the glute medius is a big muscle. The glute max kind of comes like this, and the glute medius is right there. They kind of help build that shelf. Now, the second component to the rule of thirds is around a third of your sets should be heavy, for low reps. A third should be moderate for medium reps, and a third should be light for higher reps. Mm-hmm. Whenever we do studies comparing like heavyweight versus lightweight for muscle growth, the heavy group always gains more strength, but the groups gain the same amount of muscle hypertrophy. Mm-hmm. It's like you can gain muscle through a variety of rep ranges, but here's the deal. The heavy group after 10 weeks, they're always like, tell the researchers, like, I feel like if I go one more week, I'm going to injure myself. My joints are killing me. the high rep group, sometimes you get dropouts because they don't want to puke. Like they're like, I feel like I'm going to throw up. If you do a set of 30 to actual failure, you feel like puking. That's why I like a variety of rep ranges. You don't do all one range. And then the last component of the rule of thirds is this effort. Like around a 30 set should be 2 failure, but not all of them. If you did every set to actual failure, you'd be beat up too much. Another third should be around, a couple reps shy of failure. And then the other third should be nowhere close to failure. And you'd say, like, think about doing band work. Mm-hmm. There was this central governor theory back in the day that this researcher postulated about running. You're running a marathon or something, and you're like, oh my God, I can't run another, I have to stop. It's burning so bad. I can't do it. It's your brain. It's not your muscles failing. It's your brain. It's just too much for the brain. But if someone said to you, like, holy shit, there's a tiger behind you, run. That's the same, kind of similar with lateral band walks and things like that. Like when you use a band and do stuff like that, it burns like crazy. But if someone had a gun to your head, you could probably do 10 more. So you don't really take those to failure. So if you do it like that, you can probably do a lot more volume. And I always think of like other muscle groups. Like people don't care. Like women care so much about glutes that I've gone into all this thought. And if you thought about deltoids, you could probably think the same way. But even with like pecs, you're like, apply the same logic to the pecs. Well, if you did a third of the exercise that work you in the stretch, and then a third that work you like cable crossovers, just work you in a squeeze position. And then we figured out how to do like internal rotation movements or something. We don't do that because these movements tend to be good, but the girls want every last bit, they can squeeze out every last bit of hypertrophy they want. They want to isolate, they want to do every bit of movement, but it's interesting to think about if that applies to other muscles as well. But that's my theory.
On to a few things that you just picked up, which I love hearing your thoughts on. There's so many ways of achieving great results. Obviously, I've got a great way, and then you hear someone that gets really strong or gets a very similar result to what I'm doing, and they do it a completely different method. Something that I like to do is periodize intensities as I periodize volume as well. And, you're talking about doing all different intensities and all different rep ranges and sets within the same training week. Am I right by saying you kind of do it all? Is that like an all year round thing that you'd follow the rule of threes where you're doing a heavy, medium, light in a training week and you can continue that through the entire year?
Okay, I've got a very interesting way of periodizing. I've never heard, I'm really glad to talk about. I don't think I've ever talked about this on a podcast. Woo-hoo. So never, I want to like publish this because it's funny. My Booty by Bret, I do this for my Booty by Bret, right? So I just started out thinking, the way this came to be, I started out thinking, okay, say I want to all right, chin-ups, they're so hard to go up on, But if I ever want to really set a chin-up PR, I can, especially if you lose weight while you're at it. But if I just say, I'm going to start doing chin-ups 3 times a week, first in the workout, and I do that for 6 weeks, I'm going to set a chin-up PR. The reason why I don't set many chin-up PRs is it's usually the third exercise I do. I'll do them once or twice a week. They're not my number one priority. I start getting, as I get older, it's getting harder and harder to set PRs in a squat, the deadlift. Like the most I've ever deadlifted is 620. I want to deadlift 635. That's 6 plates and a 25 on each side. That's like the milestones I think about. So if I want to do that, I've got to prioritize my deadlift, which means probably doing it first, but every lift has its own rules. And that's what fascinates me. It's like, if you wanted to prioritize your squat, well, you could probably squat hard 3 times a week, right? If you wanted to really build your deadlift, for most people, I like one really heavy deadlift, one really hard deadlift day a week, and then one other day where you do like stiff legs or something else, but I don't have people do heavy deads 2 or 3 times a week. It's too much. But instead, my assistance lifts tend to be a little more like weighted 45-degree hypers, things that work the hamstrings more or something like that. But then we could go on to what's their weak link, because a lot of people, it's their quad, a lot of women especially, it's their quads inhibiting their deadlift because they turn it into a stiff leg. But I digress. here's what I do for Booty by Bret. And I actually think it works really, really well. And my whole concept, the other thing that made me think about this, I started reading the literature on strength maintenance. And I was like, holy crap, these people can do like 2 sets a week and maintain their strength on a lift. So I started experimenting with some of my clients, and I'd have them I'd just have them do 1 set of bench press or 1 set of squats or 1 set of deadlifts a week. They do other things, but I just wanted to see. The next month I'd have them max out and they retain their strength. Going, wow, as long as you're doing other things, it's kind of easy to maintain. So the way I thought about it, I love powerlifting, love it. I love the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. Here's the deal though. I also love the hip thrust, the chin up, the military press. So those, I just named 6 lifts. So this is kind of funny because I'm talking about balls, but imagine you got 6 balls, okay? I've got 6 balls and I'm trying to juggle them. But every time I gain strength, the ball grows. So your goal is to have 6 big, huge balls, right? But you're juggling them, it gets harder.
I can't take you seriously.
So you're eventually going to drop a ball. You can't keep doing it. They get bigger and you're like, oh, and they fall out. So it's a better strategy to say, I'm going to focus on 2 balls. I'm going to put 4 balls right here on this table and pick 2. These go on maintenance. I'm going to take these 2 balls, focus on them. I mean, just in powerlifting, how much easier would it be if you just had the squat and the bench? The deadlift interferes with the squat. So it's like, sometimes I'm like, God, I want to build my squat, but then I deadlift, my low back sore. It makes my, it's even just with 3 lifts, it's hard. So I'll typically pick 1 lower body lift and 1 upper body lift, and that's what we focus on. I am always doing all 6 of those lifts I mentioned. Every program has, every week you're going to do some squats, some deadlifts, some hip thrusts, some bench press, some military press, some chin-ups, some single leg work, some rows, but it all, the ingredients shuffle. So here's how I do it. Month 1 is a well-rounded month, okay? So Monday, or day 1, say it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, day 1, 2, and 3. Monday you squat, Wednesday you hip thrust, Friday you deadlift. You also might do stiff legs on your squat day. You might do, on your deadlift day, you might do like reverse lunges or something. You're still going to do more lifts, but that's what you do first. That's a well-rounded month where you're trying to, and then maybe your upper body lifts are like bench press on Monday, chin-ups on Wednesday, military press on Friday, okay? You're not focusing on any lift. That's month 1. Month 2, now you're focusing on the squat and the military press, okay? So we're going to squat first, all right? Then squat and military press first, and everything else is more maintenance. Yep. Then the next month is, and I do this sequentially because after the squat month, your knees could use a rest. So the next month is hip thrust. It's hip thrust and chin-ups. So we work hard at hip thrust and the chin-up. Then you're feeling good again. The next month it's deadlifts and bench press. You still squat, but you deadlift first. And then I'll do like say Monday is deadlifts, like whether you do conventional or sumo or semi-sumo, whatever, trap bar if you want, but you're going to pick a heavy deadlift. And then maybe Wednesday is dumbbell 45-degree hyper and like a single leg movement. And then like Friday might be stiff leg deadlifts and, maybe squats or something. But that you're doing them first in the workout, so it sees the best results. And then after deadlifts, your low back is pretty beat up. So the next month it's a single leg and dumbbell focus. I still sprinkle in some barbell and bilateral lifts, but it's a lot of focus on single leg and dumbbells just to give your body a little bit of a break. And then the cycle repeats. And I really think it works well, especially for people. Well, my people don't get hurt much. It's really good for injury prevention because you're not focusing on the big 3 every single month. And that's one thing. I trained at a powerlifting gym in Tempe, Arizona for a couple of years. These guys were so strong, guys in the 198 pound class pulling 730, 750, stuff like that. But one thing I noticed, they get too strong for their bodies. I remember they were competing at Dan Green's powerlifting event. I was there the week before, and one's like, I'm just worried I'm going to tear my pec off the bone. And the other's like, that's how I feel about my hamstring. I'm worried I'm going to tear it complete off the bone. And I'm like, Jesus, you're really pushing the envelope here with powerlifting. So I like all 6 of the lifts I mentioned. I think that's a good way so you're always doing all the lifts, but you're only focusing on really gaining strength. So then it's like the goal is to elevate these 2 lifts this month, then put those on maintenance. And so over the course of a whole year, you're building up on all of them. Do you gain its strength as fast on any one lift? No, but it leads to longer sustained progress over the long run. It's an interesting way to periodize, which I've never really seen anyone do it that way. You study periodization, it just talks about volume and intensity. It doesn't talk about rotating the lifts that you focus on.
Yeah, as you're talking, everything resonates with me with what you're discussing. And the best example of that is what just happened. It's the most recent event, and that is Hafthor doing a 501 kilogram deadlift. Previous to this, he was prioritizing 6 different events for like the Arnolds or the World's Strongest Man. There might be 10 different events. And how do you focus on training 10 things at one time? And how do you get a 501 kilogram deadlift while this is happening as well? For me, there was no surprise that he was able to get a 501 kilogram deadlift when he had no other exercises that he needed to focus on. So I absolutely and wholeheartedly agree that, the more things that you try and add to the equation, the bigger all of your balls get, and the harder it is to juggle all of them. So I love those points with it. So the bottom line is a lot of it's something that I always hear so much about with the studies, and people are talking about this is the way you've got to do it. You've got to, 5 to 10 sets is better. And it's like, okay, better than what? Then it's the minimum effective dose versus maximum recoverable volume, and you should be working as hard as possible. And it's like, well, if you, like how you said, there was the study that did the heavyweights, and after 10 weeks they were sick and tired of lifting heavy. It's like, well, that's because they're trying to lift heavy all year round, and I think that's a really good message for all of our audiences. You can't do everything at once. You can't beat your body up all year round. Something's got to give. Recovery is equally as important as working hard, and there is a time and place for all of it. So I really love those messages there, Bret.
Can we just go back to talking about the glutes before we go on to some business talk? So for our Base Body Babes, so we specialise in training women as well, and we've maybe the last couple of years, introduced glute activation routines for our girls prior to all of their sessions. We just want to know your opinion. What's the current research in terms of glute activation being effective?
Okay, so there's probably I've got them all categorized. There's about 6 studies looking at it. It's equivocal, like some studies showing it works well, other studies not. And there's one study using TMG. It's like this transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS. Yeah, they put some halo thing on your head and measure the areas of like brain activation, like cortical regions. And it's funny, they had people put a band around their knees. They got on all fours and did like a hip extension, hip abduction, they basically got on all fours with a band. And imagine being a participant in this study. They had to do this for 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week. So they were it was like on all fours, like this, with a band going out and back and twisting. So you try to hold that off and on for 20 minutes, 3 times a day. So for a total
for those who have audio only, he just got in a position that a dog would do to take a pee. Yeah. Is that accurate?
That is so accurate.
That's why it's called a fire hydrant. That kind of fire hydrant, like a dog pees on a fire hydrant. That's the exercise. But you got a band on you, kind of trying to do. They wanted isometric because they believed that you focus harder on isometric. So they wanted to see. So it was a 1 week long study, and they showed that just in 1 week of doing these glute activation, you had increased activation in the brain and also decreased inhibitory signals or something. So that to me was the best piece of evidence in favor of glute activation. Now, here's the problem. It's a funny world we live in. It's like probably 2/3 of the world needs to exercise more. Like they're sedentary and, we've got all these overweight and unhealthy people out there. They need to exercise. And then there's a portion that we work with where like half of the people we work with are actually psychos. Like they're exercise addicts and they do too much. So these are the people that before they squat, they're doing 62 sets of glute activation to failure. And it's like, that's not the point. You you don't fatigue yourself. You're not going to have Thor be doing like lateral band walks to failure. You want, so I don't do as much glute activation as other people do.
Yeah, that 20 minutes is, I think our glute activation takes us a maximum of about a minute to say 20 minutes per day.
Something that we say a lot of is stimulate, not annihilate.
Yeah, yep, I use that too. So anyway, I think that we're covering all the different movements from a strength perspective. But here's the deal. When I worked out at the powerlifting gym for a couple of years, these guys they'd be like, Bret, if I do some band hip thrusts, kind of like light for 20 reps, my hips don't hurt when I squat. Or they'll be doing their lateral band walks, and a lot of them would take 30 minutes to warm up. These guys are upper level people. What are you going to do? Criticize their warm-up routine? It takes a while. The stronger you get, it takes you a while, your routine, to get into the mix. My girls can seriously walk right in and like start lifting heavy. Like, I don't know. I would crumble if I did that. Like, I got to warm up gradually. But I think most of my women, I have them do like a couple sets of light goblet squats, a couple sets of reverse lunges, and maybe they do some lateral band, but it's a few minutes and then they're ready to roll.
Yeah, ours is very minimal as well, just a minute or two max.
Is it female only where you are at your gym?
I have like one dude that comes and trains regularly, but
does he come in for himself, or does he come because it's a gym full of chicks?
It's funny. I always
you question that one as well.
But he's friends with all of them. He like knows all of them, and he's really cool. But the problem is, the men. If I had like 10 strong dudes in here, you'd need, for some of these movements, you need 500, 600 pounds. You'd need so many 45-pound plates if I had a bunch of dudes in here. Also, they sweat so bad. We sweat, dripping sweat everywhere.
Don't worry, we don't like guys in our gym either.
For sure, that's why we created our female-only space, because no chick wants to work out with big, hairy men like you guys. But who is your main clientele? Females?
Are they all bikini models? Are they general population? Like, obviously.
Well, so it's funny because when I moved to San Diego, I didn't know what to expect, but I just started my first two clients were this Brianna and Massa, and they were competitors with these big, huge butts. And then they started tagging me, and then every bikini competitor in the city wanted to train with me. So all of a sudden I'm training like 50 bikini competitors, and then I'm getting inquiries from all over the world. That's where it really blew up in popularity. I just started working with so many bikini competitors, and then I started missing. So it's like I have this client, Jade, and she's got this amazing butt, and she gets so strong. She's very strong, and I get to where she's deadlifting like 220. She's like weighs like 100, and say she weighs 125 or 100, something like that, and she starts deadlifting 225 for sets of 10, and all of a sudden her coach freaks out, and she's like, your butt is getting way too big. This is not, you're going to be penalized for it.
Really?
And she knows more than I do about because she goes to all the events, and
the judging criteria.
I defer to, I defer to her coach, but I'm like, shit, I can't even do my thing. Like, to me, there's no such thing as too big of glutes. Like,
you've had that problem training the fitness models as well, Bas.
But different body parts, because
different
obviously
parts,
I'm using different exercises, but I wouldn't have expected it that way with the glutes. But for me, when I get girls squatting and deadlifting heavy, they're definitely building things that are not as desirable, such as thicker rectus spinae and bigger quads. And it's a real pain in the butt for me, because exactly what you said, I can't do what I do, man.
Like Hattie's erectors get too big, and it sucks because she could be so strong at the deadlift if she could train it, Yeah. I'm always like, Hattie, why don't you just do like 3 singles with deadlifts, like 3 sumo deadlifts, 3 singles, or like, but she can get too, like, her erectors can get too big. So I do think that, so what I did, I started missing training just like people to train for strength. So now I've got some girls that are really well-rounded, and it's really cool. And they're like, I've got my client Ashley, she just pulled 385, and she weighs 150. And so she's about to pull 405 soon, 4 plates, I love testing my theories, like looking at, she'll pull sumo, but her hips shoot up, and she almost stiff legs her sumo. She doesn't round. She keeps that arch, but her hips shoot up. So I have her doing every other week. I have her doing super upright sumo deadlifts where she's super, super upright. She has to go down to her first week doing those. They felt so weird for her, and she was so weak in her quads. She's doing sets of 3 with 275, 3x3 with 275. Well, now she's up to doing 3x3 with 315, but it's building her. Then when I have her max out, I just go, don't worry about form. Let your hips shoot up if you need to. We just want to get that weight. Been building it. I bet you she'll get 4 plates soon. It's kind of fun for me to train. It's more fun training people for strength when you, instead of training these.
Hence what I do.
Yeah.
The aesthetics game for me, it's too much of a pain in the butt, especially dealing with a lot of women.
We're annoying.
They get a little bit more emotional about it. I don't know I get awkward when girls cry in the gym.
He's non-emotional and he's not very
Do I pat him on the back here?
sympathetic.
Or I don't know what to do. So I just stick to strength.
I don't know how I ended up working with all these women because I'm like,
well, you've
we're
obviously
talking about-
done something right because you are an absolute pioneer in that space. So it's awesome to see. Just in terms of the Glute Lab, so that's your gym where you are at right now. Is it so? What would someone walking into the gym expect from training there? Are they classes? Is it a systemized approach? Is it customized programming?
Okay, what I'm after is the knowledge. So I don't care about making money from my gym. I don't even charge anyone here.
Dory, neither do we really.
Neither-
And
neither
in
do
this
we.
one, we don't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in this base gym here, no.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I don't charge anyone. I just I want them to. I want the knowledge. I want to work with tons of people, and I want to work with high level people. And the athletes don't always have a lot of money and stuff. So, but that way I don't have to feel guilty too if I'm not, But you start out just. My this gym in California, things take longer than other states like that have, and I didn't get my business permit for like an extra month or two after I thought I would. So I started training them for free, and then I got my license here, and I'm like, I don't want any of them to stop training with me. I know it's expensive out here in San Diego, so I was like, I'll just won't charge them. So then, as time went on, I said, this is nice to have this studio here because I do all my, my Instagram stuff, my videos, my testing. I create products. I test them. It's just a testing grounds. So people always have people go, like they think that I don't, they'll be like, Bret, I know you're probably hurting during the quarantine here. You're probably they think because I can't train anyone, I wouldn't make any money. But if you think about it, what can you make as a personal trainer? I have friends that train celebrities in LA and they can charge $250 an hour. That's like the going rate out there. Like, I don't think I could charge $250 here in San Diego. People would be like $250 an hour. But yeah, you can only make a couple $100 an hour. Sounds like crazy that I would even say this, but you can make way more money online.
Exactly.
If you have a huge following.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be the guy that's like, I'm $200 and I also one-on-one training bores the heck out of me. It's just so boring. I like training, 6, 10, 15, 20 people at a time. And that's what I prefer doing. And I just love working with a large variety of people. And I miss training with men too. Like the men women get bombarded all day long with different messages. It's like, they're being targeted by this builds long, lean muscles or like this, you know what I mean? So they're always doubting. It's like, women's bodies fluctuate and they have a bad glute day or a bad, bloated day. And then they start doubting the whole process and you got to reassure them a lot. Men know that weight training, you don't have to sell men on weight training and getting strong and progressive overload, You just know from the age of 15 when we start lifting weights that if we want nice pecs, we got to bench press a few plates for reps,
Yeah. I was going to say, obviously, you're a huge influence in the fitness industry and you've inspired many women, thousands of women, millions of women around the world with your work. Was there a point in your career, so was it social media first? Was it a bikini model on stage first? What kind of launched that growth online for you?
So when I started out, it was funny. I was just coming off being a high school math teacher, making $30,000 a year. So I said, I'm going to start blogging. I'm going to start social media. I don't need a lot to survive. So I start blogging like 4 times a week. All
I'm
I had was
sure
my
you're like the most published fitness expert out there. You've written so much.
I mean, I was a workhorse, and
Yeah.
I look back, I always put in long hours, and you can only sustain that if you love your field. You know, we're so lucky to have found stuff we're passionate about, because most people just they look at work like they clock in, clock out. They can't wait to go home for the weekend and be done with it. And I even on like, I don't have off days. I train people every single day. I lift almost every day. I read stuff every day. I some days more than others, but it's not torture for me. I'm so curious about it. It's what I'd be doing if I won the lottery and had, you know, $100 million in the bank. I would still be doing this. So to start off, I was just blogging and then doing social media. But here's the funny thing. I have an identical twin brother, and he's like, you need to go on Instagram. I'm like, Joel, I'm a businessman. I'm not trying to.
That was him too.
Yeah. And I was so anti-Instagram. And Joel's like, trust me, it's the wave of the future. And I'm like, how? You can't link out. Like on Facebook, Twitter, you post links to your blog, to your whatever. You launch a new product, a new thing. Like, here's my new ebook or something. You can't do that on Instagram. And he's like, just trust me, it's the wave of the future. And around that time, I was so pissed because Facebook changed their algorithms. And it's like, I worked hard for like 5 years on Facebook. I think I had like 110,000 followers back then on Facebook. And all of a sudden I went from like, it was always the same too. I'd film a YouTube video, embed it in my blog, write a blog, use a thumbnail for the blog, publish the blog, post that on Facebook and Twitter, and then send out a newsletter. It was like, that was the process for so many years, and it worked well. Then all of a sudden Facebook changed their algorithms, and I go from getting like 2,000 likes and 500 shares to getting 500 likes and 30 shares. And I'm like, this is stupid. It took away my power. Like, I always had power as a scientific guy. If I wanted to, someone was spreading pseudoscience and I wanted to do something, but I could leave the algorithms out of it and I could go viral. But it was so frustrating to me. So I was the first guy, I think, I actually just quit. I quit Facebook. I quit Twitter. I quit YouTube. I put all my eggs in the Instagram basket.
We've pretty much done that as well, to be honest.
And then I had all the marketers back then. They were like, Instagram doesn't mean anything. And I'm going, how would you know? You don't have a lot of Instagram followers. And they're all about the email marketing and the newsletters. And I'm never going to be the type of guy that, like, these guys are crazy with their newsletter marketing. There's like, you can do split testing. I'm never going to write 2 different newsletters and test them and see which one does better. I don't care about making money to that extent. So I just send out a newsletter like once a month that's like, here's some new stuff, here's some links, have at it. But I realized, this is crazy. I'll put something on my Instagram, especially when stories came around. You can swipe up, and I'll put something on my Instagram, my feed and my stories, and then I'd also send it out to my newsletter, but I'd make like 5 times more money from Instagram than my newsletter list. And my newsletter list, I think, is like 140,000 right now, but I have like almost 1 million followers on Instagram right now, and I think around like 50,000 people look at my stories. So
wow, that's amazing.
That's insane.
So I guess the take-home point there is to be consistent with your content, and obviously you are always producing really great quality content. So it's definitely worked.
But I think the turning point was like with my followers. You know, for a while I didn't really. If you look back, you can kind of scroll back at the evolution of my Instagram, and it used to be just my workouts. I'd film my workout at night and post my workout. And then I'd like repost an infographic someone else did or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't put my thought into it. But I actually have my master's degree in education, secondary ed, like curriculum instruction. Once I started focusing on that, I'm a born teacher. I like educating people. When I start focusing on educating people, don't make it about me. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would be one thing if I were Thor or just some Greek god, but I'm not. A very 43-year-old dude that, you know, like, I'm not some Greek god. And people don't follow me for my crazy strength or physique. They follow me for my knowledge. And I start helping other people, that's when I start doing infographics, when I started making it more about educating, and then also coming out to San Diego. And it's funny because all my colleagues were like, you don't charge people. You need to respect yourself, Bret. You need to respect.
We've heard that.
And I'm going, these people don't get it. I don't have to pay any of these girls, and they're tagging me like crazy. And then I share it. So we build each other up.
Yeah,
exactly.
We're all building each other up. We're all sharing each other and reposting. They gain some of my followers. I gain some of their followers, but it gives me social proof. When this girl's giving me a big hug saying, I love my coach, it makes me more relatable, And so I just saw it as a win-win. And then I gain the knowledge from training them. And so my followers start going up and up and up. And then I was talking to my friend Carrie, and she's like, Bret, you're the world's glute expert and you don't have a flagship glute program. I'm like, yeah, I do. I have Strong by Bret. She's like, that sounds like powerlifting. People don't want a powerlifting program from you. And I'm like, well, I do have Booty by Bret trademarked. I've just never used it. She's like, change it to Booty by Bret and actually promote it. I filmed a video and I actually posted it. I went from 800 subscribers to like 2,200 in a couple weeks. Then that just kept growing and growing. And now I think I have the peak before the quarantine, some people dropped out, but it was at 65.50, paying me $30 every 4 weeks. So that's just one of my revenue streams. I also make equipment. I also have,
we want one of your machines.
We wanted to ask you about that.
We've got our gym here, and we've got very specialized equipment, and that is definitely something that we wanted to go down the path of. As you say, the introduction of just the name Booty by Bret, it boosted your business a lot, and we're very aware of the niche of, and the need for prioritizing glutes, especially for females. So we're in the process of building a gym upstairs. So this is a base gym. This is a specialized performance gym. And upstairs, we wanted to do a whole bunch of stuff with glutes. And we thought, you know what, why don't we ask Bret while he's there on what's the best piece of equipment that he'd advise that we should get for our gym. We've got squat racks and barbells and all of those things.
We've got all the squat racks and barbells, but I've got all the machines in storage right now. Like there's this Gluteator that people love. That's like a abduction, but hip extension abduction machine. I've got.
You made me cry when you put me on that when I came to San Diego. You
were like, that's right.
Go 10 reps, and then you were like 20, and then you were like 30, and I literally was crying.
Well, so I also have the Nautilus glute drive, the booty builder, the glute builder. That's what The Rock uses, that glute builder. When he does his hip thrust. The booty builder is probably the favorite. Women love it. I don't like it as much. I like the Nautilus glute drive. I actually like hip thrust. It's funny. This is my hip thruster right here. And I don't like it that much anymore. Yeah, what's nice about that is see the pegs here? Mm-hmm. See the bands right here?
Yeah.
You hook those bands up. You can also just do pure band hip thrusts. And those are really nice. But that's, I actually prefer hip thrusting off the Smith machine, and with the Nautilus glute drive, which is right here. Here's the Nautilus glute drive.
Oh, we've tried that one at Pro Raw. Is that the one? Yeah.
The thing is, some people don't like the Nautilus glute drive. Some people don't like. So here's my philosophy now. Think about an Olympic weight training center. Guess what you're going to get good at if you train at an Olympic weight training center? Squats and cleans and stuff. They've got so many squat stands and platforms. You're going to get good at squatting. And, so what I just did, I cleared this out, and it's like you got just a whole row of these glute benches.
Do you make those?
Yeah, I make those. So 10 glute benches, and it's so nice because they're the right height. People don't want to hip thrust off a tall bench.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they look great. Well, we run classes upstairs, so having a few of them would be awesome.
Then you've got the light bar, so it's a more narrow barbell, and then you've got the squat sponge. I have 10 girls hip thrusting at a time. All my girls here are hip thrusting, 400 or 500 pounds, and their glutes are amazing. So that to me, it's like if you want your girls getting good at squats, you got to have squat stands or power racks. If you want your girls getting good at hip thrust, you have a bunch of those, and they start out with those. and they get really, really strong at them. And it's just the right height. So I would recommend, instead of saying, because I've got all the machines, I've got them all. I have the reverse hyper, the 45-degree hyper. I love things like, here's this lever squat machine that I have. I love this for lunges, you know what I mean? Reverse lunges and like Bulgarian split squats. I've got lever squat. I've got the hammer strength for stiff legs. I've got Nordic ham curl station right there. I've got the pit shark, 45-degree hyper, the seated hip abduction machine you should get.
Yeah.
Women, and we do all sorts of cool stuff of it, like triple drop sets. I'll do eccentric, eccentric, where I pull, and then they take over the eccentric phase, and I pull. I put on like the stack, and I help them, and then they take over the eccentric. I've got a hack squat machine. And all this group. This is my favorite leg press. It's the Cybex squat press. That's the most comfortable leg press. I also have these T-bells here, and those people love them.
Yes. So you stand up on those boxes.
Yeah.
Stand on the boxes. It's just some people can, their squat. And I do straddle lifts, which is kind of like a squat and a deadlift mixed. It's kind of like they go deep, but they lean a lot. And then, of course, the reverse hyper right here. This has been my workstation for 20 years.
That's so cool. It's like a playground for glutes. So good.
Well, I would say, instead of trying to get the Booty Builder and the Matrix Glute Trainer and the Nautilus Glute Drive and the Glute Builder and all these fancy things, the Gluteator, just get a ton of those glute benches and the light bar and all these things. Get a ton of these and prioritize hip thrusting, and then have plenty of bands like the glute loops and stuff. Have plenty of those, and then start working on obtaining some of the pricier pieces, because that's all. If the women already do your squats and deadlifts and lunges, then they also do their hip thrusts and maybe get a good 45-degree hypers for back extensions, and then their abduction work, you're set. So that's what I would recommend.
Great advice.
Yeah, cool. That is great advice. Just before we wrap up, we always like to give our girls some tips to take away with them. Now that we're all in quarantine, Australia is actually quite strict at the moment. There's really heavy restrictions, and we train a lot of women from home, and we have bodyweight programs ourselves. But is there any particular exercises that you love, and do you think that we can maintain muscle mass in the glutes while training from home?
Or even gain.
Or even gain? And what about strength as well? What are your favorite exercises? Frequency.
So okay, during this quarantine period, it's been interesting because I've had some girls comment on my Booty by Bret Facebook page. They're like, I feel like my glutes have gotten bigger. It just works for them. But then I start doing a lot of research, and I'm like, who are the most jacked guys that just use body weight, like these gymnasts? And I thought there's all these jacked, shredded gymnasts out there, and I started looking at their physiques, and they're actually not as impressive as I thought. All compared to male bodybuilders, you know what I mean? Even the natural bodybuilders. So kind of, in theory, you can gain just as much muscle from high reps, but you got to progress things. Don't just get to where you're doing 50 push-ups. Work on doing self-assisted one-arm push-ups where you're doing sets of 10 that are hard. You know what I mean? Handstand push-ups from a deficit where it's really challenging. See, people they just stick to don't just do hip thrusts, do partner hip thrusts where you have your
I saw
man.
you doing that on your...
Lots of that.
So what are some progressions for the glute bridge / hip thruster at home?
Well, okay, so
single leg.
It's hard. The single leg is probably the hardest, but if you don't have a partner, and like knee banded where you really push out against the bands, but that's abduction with hip extension. So it's kind of hard. So then I'll start doing but I don't like confusing people. And on my page, I've been posting do 15 single leg right into 15, come up with two legs and then down with one leg, up with two legs. So it's eccentric, and then into B stance. So it's your glutes burning like crazy, but that's more of a circuit. It's where do you do progressive overload? So that's why I say, get to where you're doing pistol squats. Take the time. Now is a good time to get through, work on pistols, work on single leg stuff, work on this. But I don't think you can build as much muscle without the barbell, without dumbbells, without free weights. But I do think you can use an intelligent training programs and maintain a lot of it, or at least build like, say, 85% of it. You got to experiment to find what exercise work well for you. I know for me, there are a lot of people who don't like frog pumps. Frog pumps hit my glutes so hard. I do high rep.
I feel that too.
When I came to see you, Bret, you were doing some research on the B stance. How'd you go with that?
Yeah, still haven't. I love like getting the data and I look at it and then I don't publish it. But there was some interesting stuff. I need to like summarize it, but it's different for the different lifts. Like, and like with hip thrusts, people use that assistance leg more than you think, especially at the top, and it's kind of for balance. It's like, in theory, we say with the B stance, you're using 70% on one leg, 30% on the other for stability. But as you go heavier and heavier, you start using that support leg more and more. And then with the different lifts, and some people use it more than others. So you see people hip thrusting like 315 B stance. They're using both legs. It's more like an asymmetrical double leg. Like you really got to focus hard to only use that for balance, you know?
Well, when you've done some more research, we'll come back to you.
So we're going to wrap it up now. You mentioned before on your Instagram, you're about to hit 1 million followers, 996,000. That's amazing. Congratulations.
So good.
So cool. So you're obviously doing lots of great things that people want to see. Do you want to just tell us what does the rest of 2020 hold for the Glute Guy?
I wrote Glute Lab and, had the Glute Lab, the book is 606 pages, but I wrote about every single squat, single leg squat, deadlift, hip thrust, like every exercise there was. And I really went in depth. They let me include everything. I got to include half the stuff I've talked about today. They let me include that in on there, training around injury, diet stuff, like macros, all that stuff. It's a really comprehensive book. That took me 2 years of my life, and it almost killed me. So,
and that's available to purchase now?
Yeah, that's out there at Amazon. But I worked so hard on that. I'm like, my goal now is to don't screw. I have this habit of once my life gets good, I then screw it up by taking on too.
Don't do that.
Do not accept anything. Don't take on any new projects. Just enjoy what you have, and I could. Don't get too overwhelmed. So that's my goal right now, is to not get too overwhelmed. And what a crazy time we're in too right now with the coronavirus.
Exactly.
So
it's a good time to take a step back and chill out a little bit.
I don't know when the gyms are going to reopen and how everything's going to look, but also my lease ends in October. And I want a bigger gym. This is 1,800 square feet. I want 5,000 square feet. I miss having equipment for me. Like I want a leg extension. I want a leg curl machine. I want the lateral raise machines. I love those. I want the free motion dual, tool train. I miss these things and I don't have room for it.
You're so selfish.
Well,
I think you got to be sometimes.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
We're exactly the same. We built this place just for us as well. So we get you. We're on that side as well.
Look, I wasn't planning on building a gym here. I just thought I'd train at all these, I'd just get a bunch of memberships, and I went to all of them and I was underwhelmed. And I'm like, God, I don't like training all of them. Also with Instagram, I'd be having to shoulder tap people and be like, hey, bro, you mind filming this? And they never keep it here. They always aim it at and then there's the person in the background doing one arm rows, like with the worst,
you need your own space. Definitely need your own space.
On the note of Instagram, is that the best place for people to find you? And if it is, what are your handles? Where can people find you?
Yeah, at Bret Contreras 1, I think you can type in like Glute Guy and it comes up. If you don't remember Bret Contreras, but at Bret Contreras was taken by some dude that's posted like twice. I wish I could override him. And
how
be like,
annoying!
You don't post, you don't get the handle. But I had to do Bret Contreras 1. I wonder how many times he's got tagged as like for glutes, and he's going, "What is this guy obsessed with glutes?" We all have our link tree, and like you can walk the link tree. You can subscribe to the newsletter and find all my other stuff.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It is late in the afternoon there in San Diego. We are about to start our day here, but I'm very inspired to go train my glutes right now.
And I really appreciate that chat that we had with you. It was great. This is the first time that I've met you.
Me too.
It was great to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on. And
you guys are in Sydney, right?
Yeah.
I'll visit Sydney. I would love to come work out with you guys. And if you guys are ever in
And
San
vice versa, 100%. We would love to come and do a session there with you.
We'll be heading to the States as soon as they open the borders. So when they do that, we will make sure we make a trip to you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll
Chat
talk to you
soon.
soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.